In a race against time, some European companies are rushing to export their goods to the United States, fearing a further increase in American customs duties. Container exports via the port of Antwerp to the U.S. rose by 3% in the first quarter, compared with the first quarter of 2024. On closer examination, two of the sectors most affected by the U.S. tariff hikes saw their exports to the U.S. rise slightly. In the first quarter, European steel exports rose by 2% and vehicle exports by 1%, compared with the same period last year. Faced with Donald Trump's unpredictable changes of course, European exporters seem to be sailing close to the wind.
We see that some companies are anticipating on these tariffs and have decided to export their goods before the tariffs were imposed. But if we look in general from a port perspective, if we look at all the different segments and categories, that impact is rather limited.
European nations have long exported a range of prized goods to the United States. Think French wines, Italian fashion, and Irish butter. But for Germany, cars are the crown jewel, and that industry may soon face a sharp shakeup. Global markets are once again in turmoil, this time triggered by sweeping tariffs from U.S. President Donald Trump. Asian stock markets nosedived at the week's open, stoking renewed fears of a global recession. Because domestic issues are so closely tied to global shifts, let's start with America's tariff strategy. Germany, France, and Denmark, three influential European powers, have taken bold steps that are rattling U.S. auto giants. From stricter environmental regulations to new customs protocols, these changes are chipping away at the competitiveness of American-made cars in Europe.
And global automakers are assessing their options in a tough terrain surrounded by tariffs. President Trump's latest trade move has unlocked panic across the global auto industry, sending shockwaves through markets and boardrooms alike. The United States announced a 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts, effective April 3rd for vehicles and 3rd of May for components. The move is aimed at boosting domestic manufacturing, but it comes at a higher cost. Higher car prices, disrupted supply chains, and an economic standoff with key trade partners. Half of all cars sold in the US are imported, with major production hubs in Europe, Mexico, Japan, and South Korea. Auto giants like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Toyota, and Hyundai are now bracing for significant financial strain. In a single trading session, Asian automakers lost $16.5 billion in market value, with the European auto stocks shedding $6.4 billion. The tariff contradicts Trump's own battle against inflation, as experts predict that car prices in the U.S. could rise between $5,000 to $15,000.
With the U.S. automotive sector valued at roughly $1.5 trillion, this disruption is more than just a corporate concern. It has far-reaching implications for the global economy. For many nations, the auto industry is not just about jobs, it's tied to innovation, supply chains, and even diplomacy. This escalating friction calls into question Trump's well-known rallying cry. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first, America first. But that vision is facing headwinds. The latest regulatory push by Germany, France, and Denmark threatens to slash U.S. auto exports and has sown confusion in Washington. Could this force a major restructuring of the American car industry? Are we heading for another full-blown trade war? And can U.S. automakers, many of which are late to the electric vehicle race, catch up to Europe's green standards? Or will they lose ground in one of the world's most valuable markets? Tell us what you think. Is Europe justified in prioritizing environmental reforms, or is the U.S. right in claiming unfair treatment? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth global insights. When most people think of the U.S. auto industry, Detroit comes to mind, the powerhouse of manufacturing, home to legendary names like Ford and General Motors. For decades, America stood at the forefront of auto innovation and mass production. But the landscape has changed. Europe, and especially Germany, now leads in advanced engineering and luxury design. German automakers are known for technical precision, while France is gaining recognition for eco-friendly vehicles and sleek designs. Denmark, though smaller in size, is making waves with aggressive green energy initiatives and sustainability benchmarks. Now, these three countries are reportedly enacting measures that could paralyze U.S. car exports. Some see this as environmental protection, others call it economic warfare, a strategic move by Europe to wall off American goods. Trump's administration long argued that Europe had an unfair trade edge, especially Germany, whose cars dominate the American market.
Follow-up question for the Italian TV, Daniele Compatangelo, LA7, TV 2000, Primetime Media. So congratulations for the deal. We'll see a big revenues from the chart. But what's the rest of Europe? It's a victory day, but other European countries, it seems like they're losing the trade.
We intend to make a deal with Europe. We have found that the European Union treated us extremely unfairly, very difficult, and hurt themselves in doing so. And they very much want to make a deal. We'll be dealing with them. We are dealing with them currently. So that'll cover pretty much the rest of it. But this was separate because of Brexit in particular. This was a separate deal. It always seems so natural. I mean, all the media would say that this seemed to be like, why did this happen 25 years? Why didn't it happen a long time ago? And it was always amazing to me. Somebody would say, hey, we got to make a deal. We have to make a deal. But this deal just fell into place. The Prime Minister did a fantastic job. His representatives are total professionals, and they got along well, and it just seemed to work. And I think one of the reasons it did is because we blew up the whole system. If we would have just been dealing with you separately or, country by country, we blew up the whole system. It was very unfair to the United States. And I think because of that, this worked out so nicely.
So it's no surprise that experts predicted eventual pushback from Europe. What remains unclear is whether Germany, France, and Denmark are acting within an EU-wide framework or implementing national policies. Still, each country is turning up the pressure. Germany is raising its environmental standards and giving major incentives to electric vehicles. France is doubling down on domestic production and local supply chains. Denmark is pursuing a near-zero carbon future. These steps make it increasingly difficult for U.S. automakers, often associated with gas-guzzling, high-emission vehicles, to remain competitive in Europe. On top of that, American manufacturers could soon face extra tax classifications, complex testing protocols, and strict certification rules just to enter the market. Trump's frustration fits his brand. He often accused Europe of taking advantage of the U.S. and demanded a more balanced auto trade. But earlier negotiations failed to yield any lasting compromise. Now, Germany's push to retire gasoline and diesel engines is spooking American automakers. Brands like Ford and GM are scrambling to invest in cleaner tech or risk being shut out of Europe altogether. In France, a Buy French push is gaining momentum, with automakers like Peugeot, Citroën, and Renault enjoying government support. U.S. firms worry they'll face more regulatory barriers and fewer market opportunities, especially as France pursues its EV transformation agenda. Denmark might not grab headlines like Germany or France, but its policies are just as potent. The country aims to eliminate internal combustion engine sales within a set time frame and slap disincentive taxes on high-emission vehicles. Denmark is also pressing the EU to adopt similar measures, putting further pressure on American exporters. Even electric U.S. brands like Tesla may hold some ground, but the broader American auto industry, still tied to fuel-heavy models, is cornered. The industry's massive $1.5 trillion ecosystem includes steelworkers, software developers, suppliers, and energy firms. With so many jobs and revenues on the line, losing access to Europe is not an option U.S. automakers take lightly. Some are now eyeing Asia or South America, but Europe's high income levels and strategic value make it too important to abandon. American companies are lobbying for slower implementation or transitional rules. Yet, given Europe's surging environmental awareness, those pleas may fall on deaf ears. Trump's team miscalculated on several fronts. First, they believed they could strong-arm Europe into opening markets by using NATO contributions and trade threats as leverage. But Europe pushed back, hard. That's why American firms are calling for urgent action. Adapting to EU emission standards or relocating production would cost billions. So the impact of this European green shift cannot be understated. These policy shifts are not just shaping the EU's environmental future. They're setting expectations that U.S. auto exports may never recover their previous foothold in Europe. While Trump may publicly express confusion or frustration, the panic among American business leaders is real. Yes, the industry has always adapted to change. But switching from a century of fuel-heavy vehicles to clean electric models overnight is a massive, expensive leap. If Europe closes its markets during this transition, U.S. automakers could lose big. Meanwhile, European brands like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Peugeot, and Renault are rapidly innovating, with full support from their governments and the EU. If the U.S. doesn't keep up, it may find itself sidelined both at home and abroad. So while headlines declaring America's $1.5 trillion auto industry is paralyzed might seem overblown, they're not unfounded. The industry isn't collapsing overnight, but without decisive strategic action, long-term decline in Europe is all but guaranteed. Trump's shock may be fueled by how swiftly the shift occurred. He expected Europe to bend to U.S. pressure. Instead, he encountered a unified bloc of environmental and protectionist resolve. And if more EU nations join Germany, France, and Denmark, the wall facing U.S. carmakers will only get higher. This confirms a hard truth. America's auto industry is entering turbulent territory. So what lies ahead? One path involves diplomacy, new trade negotiations between the U.S. and the EU. American manufacturers could offer to meet emission standards in exchange for reduced regulatory hurdles. But this would take complex, drawn-out negotiations. Another path, retreat. The U.S. auto industry could shift focus to domestic markets in Asia, leaving Europe behind. But that would likely mean downsizing in the face of global competition. Ultimately, only time will reveal which route America chooses.
Over to Europe now, where Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has been racing across the continent, trying to shore up support from allies. That following Donald Trump's repeated threats over Greenland. The U.S. president says he wants to acquire the semi-autonomous Danish territory and has refused to rule out using military force to do so. His demands have sent alarm bells ringing in Copenhagen and other European capitals.
For now, one thing is certain. The actions taken by Germany, France, and Denmark have sent shockwaves through American politics and business, including Trump's camp. As Europe redefines its industrial future, the U.S. auto industry braces for a prolonged adjustment period. What's your take? Are Europe's green policies truly enough to cripple the U.S. auto sector? Or will American innovation rise to the challenge? Was Trump genuinely caught off guard, or is this part of a broader geopolitical tactic? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into global trade wars, industrial shifts, and what lies ahead for major world economies.